Welcome to another day on the Journey Chez Chem, and we're starting a brand new week, and we're going to go over some materials about our acids part 2. So pull out your penguin sheet, your periodic chart, and anything else, maybe your notes that you think may help you to answer these questions. So please do them to the best of your ability, and I'll see you in a moment. Now in number 1, we're trying to complete some equations. And I found out that whenever I see an acid anhydride, I just freak out. I freak out because I've got to find the charge of that non-metal. Well, wouldn't you know, the first one I get to is an acid anhydride. I'm just freaking out about that, so there you go. Oxygen is -2 times 3 is -6. Compounds are 0. There are 2 phosphorus, so in this case phosphorus is +3. Oh my goodness gracious. So there are 2 possible polyatomic ions that have phosphorus in them, and we know that they are either phosphate or phosphite. I know it must be one of these 2. Now oxygen is -2 times 4 is -8, and this polyatomic ion's overall charge is -3. So in this case, phosphorus is +5. That's not the one I'm looking for. Now, this one must be the one, but let's solve it anyway because we just do it for fun, and you got to know it anyway, so we might as well review it. Oxygen is -2 times 3 is -6. This whole polyatomic ion is -3. So in this case, phosphorus is +3. I get so freaked out I don't know which one I'm looking for. I thought it was this one, but it's not. It's this one. It's a good thing I looked. Good thing I did them both. You see, those things always work out. So phosphite is the one that I was looking for. Now, I know that when I have an acid anhydride and a base anhydride, I'm going to get a salt. Now, a salt is a metal with a nonmetal or a metal with a polyatomic ion. I know that I have to get a polyatomic ion because I have all of these oxygens. A salt, my metal here is sodium. Sodium is my metal. And I figured out that phosphite was my polyatomic ion. Now, I still must balance my formulas. And phosphite has a -3 charge, and sodium is +1. The lowest common multiple between 3 and 1 is 3, so I need 3 sodium atoms in order to get my compound to 0. Now, this isn't as far as I need to go. I have one more step. Just like I did in the lab, I'm going to have to add water to the salt to figure out which acid and which base are formed, or which would be the parent acid and the parent base. Now, I add water and I write it as HOH. And that way it reminds me that hydrogen is my ion that forms the acid and hydroxide is the ion that forms my base. And they do the do-si-do. And phosphite is -3, so it must have 3 hydrogens. And sodium is +1, and hydroxide is -1. So I just write it as NaOH. Now, sodium hydroxide is a strong base. And phosphorus acid is a weak acid. Whenever I have one that is weak and one that is strong, the strong one takes over and it becomes basic. My solution is basic in this case. Oh my, number 2, the second one, 1B. I have an acid anhydride. Oh my goodness, I'm going to have to freak out. Why am I freaking out? Because I have to find the charge of that nonmetal. This iodine is what I'm looking for. Oxygen is -2, times 7 is -14. Compounds are 0. There are 2 iodines, so each iodine must be +7. That's going to help me in determining which polyatomic ion is going to be formed. Because I have a base anhydride plus an acid anhydride, and I know that I'm going to get a salt. Salts are metals with polyatomic ions. We need a polyatomic ion because of all of these oxygens that we have gotten. So now I'm going to go back and look at all of those possible polyatomic ions I have with iodine in them. It's either periodate, iodate, iodite, or hypoiodite. Which one is it? Well, I know that oxygen is -2. There are 4 of them. That gives me a -8, and this polyatomic ion is -1. Therefore, in this case, iodine is +7, and that's the one I'm looking for. Now, my question is, should we continue on and do the rest of them? Oh, why not? You need to see it, and that way that you'll be able to do it when the assessment comes. I set my equation equal to -1. Oxygen is -2. There are 3 of them. That gives me a -6. In this case, iodine is +5. This polyatomic ion is -1. Oxygen is -2. There are 2 of them. And in this case, iodine is +3. Oxygen is -2. The whole polyatomic ion is -1. In this case, iodine is +1. You need to be able to do those. So I know that I am going to get a salt, and my salt is going to be iron is my metal. And periodate is my polyatomic ion. It has a -1 charge, and iron was +2, and it must stay the same, and my compound must be 0. I know that it was +2 because oxygen is -2, and compounds must be 0. And that's how we get the salt. Now, I still must add water in order to figure out my acid and base. My acid and base will be formed from my salt. And I am going to get periodic acid and iron 2 hydroxide. Both of these substances are weak electrolytes. This is a weak base, and this is a weak acid. And when both are weak or both are strong, the solution comes out to be neutral. And then the last one we have here, we have something that starts with hydrogen. It must be an acid. We have a metal with a hydroxide. It must be a base. An acid plus a base will give me a salt plus water. They do the do-si-do. Now, we are not concerned about the numbers of atoms, that there are 2 hydrogens here and 1 hydrogen here, and that's 3 hydrogens. It just doesn't work out. Do not worry about that. I just want you to be able to figure out the formulas that are correct. I know that I'm going to get water, so I'll just write water so I don't worry too much about it. Then I get my salt. My tin is my metal, and my hypobromite is my polyatomic ion, so I get SnBrO twice because tin is +2 in my first compound. And bromite, hypobromite, is -1. And compounds must be 0. Now, to determine the resulting solution, I'm going to look at my acid and my base. This is not one of my strong acids. It is a weak acid. And this is a weak base. Again, if both are weak or both are strong, my solution will be neutral. And that's how we do number 1. In number 2, we are using the materials that we've learned before, and we're adding to them. Every day we add a little bit more, and you'll understand. Now, obviously, this compound is an acid, and so it has an acid name. Iodous acid is telling me that it has 2 oxygens. It's HiO2. HiO2 is not one of our 7 strong acids. Therefore, it is a weak electrolyte. This Roman numeral 3 is telling me that bromine is +3. Oxygen is -2. The common multiple between 2 and 3 is 6. So I must have 2 bromines, and 3 oxygens to get +6 and -6 to be 0. Now, this compound is an acid anhydride. It is a nonmetal with oxygen, which by definition is an acid anhydride. Anhydrides are non-electrolytes. Only acids, bases, and salts are electrolytes. This is an acid anhydride, and it is a non-electrolyte. Now, sodium hydroxide, you've known before. Sodium is +1, hydroxide is -1. So it's NaOH. This is a strong base. It's one of my bases. It's a metal with hydroxide. It's an alkali metal, and it's a strong electrolyte. It is a strong base. Roman numeral 2 is telling me that nickel has a +2 charge. Chromate is -2. A metal with a polyatomic ion is a salt. And I'm going to write my nickel and chromate. It is a salt. It is a strong electrolyte. All salts are strong electrolytes except for the mercury salts. That's the only one you're responsible for. Calcium oxide, calcium is +2, oxygen is -2. Compounds must be 0, and +2 and -2 is 0. This is a metal with oxygen, and therefore it is a base anhydride. And remember that anhydrides are non-electrolytes. Now, I needed to speak to you specifically about hydrogen peroxide. We've named this compound, and you have done it in your naming compounds. It's H2O2, because peroxide is a polyatomic ion with a -2 charge. In this case, oxygen is -1. It's a very special compound and very special oxygen. Now, this is not an acid. I know that it starts with hydrogen, but it's not an acid. It is a molecule. It is a non-electrolyte. It's not an acid, it's not a base, it's not a salt. It is a non-electrolyte. So it's a little bit special there, that hydrogen peroxide, and I needed to make you aware of that because it does start with hydrogen, but it is not an acid. You have a review worksheet to do for tomorrow, and that review worksheet looks very, very similar to the assessment that you will see in a couple of days. So please do it to the best of your ability, and you will review it tomorrow with your facilitator. And that was some fun today, wasn't it? I can't wait to see you tomorrow. Bye.